We're going to talk a little Oregon recruiting here with Justin Hopkins of Scoop Duck. We are going to find out just how strong Oregon's current NIL machine is. But first, Justin, there's another five-star that's going to come off the board. We think he's going to come off the board before the season starts, and that's edge Anthony Tank Jones. Now, he hasn't set a date. We think it could be sometime in August, most likely, but he did cut that list down to three: Alabama, Texas A&M, and Oregon. Why are we giving Oregon a shot here despite him being from the state of Alabama?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question because it doesn't happen often, but the Ducks were able to pull off that stunner last year with Naeem Offord obviously committing to Oregon over Bama and others. So, normally I wouldn't give the Ducks much shot here, but Dane Lanning's proven he's able to win some of those battles. The one thing I will mention here is obviously Oregon held a very we'll just call it a notable commitment from Richard Wesley, another edge in this recruiting class. Obviously, now he's committed to Texas. So we know the Ducks, are looking for an edge in this class. And it feels like, now they're maybe able to allocate some of those resources into Tank Jones and make themselves a player in this recruitment. This is a tough one, though. This guy's got, I think, all three schools guessing who it might be. And all of us are guessing along with them.
Yeah. But I mean, Oregon was able to get him out. What does he like so much about Oregon? What have they done to get in this position?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've showcased what they've been able to do with defensive linemen at the school under Dane Lanning, and that's whether they're prep, whether Oregon's developed them, or whether they've been transfers that have come in and raised their NFL profile. So I know that one of the things he speaks about most frequently is the experience that the coaches have at his position. So you've got Dan Lanning, who knows how to coach that position. You've got Tosh Lupoy. You've got Tony Tuioti. You've got three really high caliber coaches there that know your position well and are able to develop you. So I think that's the big thing. The second thing, and he's mentioned this as well, is just kind of blazing his own trail, right? Trying something new, going somewhere else, maybe limiting the distractions, which Eugene's really good about, and just kind of getting away. So sometimes that just ends up being, something these kids want to do. A lot of times distance is not on Oregon's side, which it's not here. But there are some instances where young men just kind of want to get away and try something new and see something new. And that's certainly something that Tank Jones has mentioned.
All right. So we don't know when Tank Jones is going to make his decision, but we do know that there's two prospects committing on Saturday that are on Oregon's board: defensive lineman Deuce Geralds and elite defensive back Davon Benjamin, committing right here on the Rivals Recruits channel. That'll both go down on Saturday. We're hosting the Davon Benjamin one. So which one of these commitments do you think Oregon has a better shot at, and is there a chance that they could land them both on Saturday?
Good chance they could land both. Won't be easy. We know that. I like Davon Benjamin as we kind of enter this thing this week. I know that there will be news throughout the week, but I know Michigan and others have continued to push, but relationships have held out strong there. Benjamin's always spoke highly of Oregon, even dating back to a year ago. It just really feels like that's one Oregon's kind of like sunk their claws into, if you will, and done a really good job recruiting. Deuce Geralds has kind of been all over the board, right? Kind of felt like Ohio State at some point, felt like maybe Ole Miss or LSU. Oregon's kind of worked themselves in there late. So, for me with that one, kind of keeping track, again, we're talking about a young man out of Georgia. Will distance be a factor? Done this for a long time, and all of a sudden it gets close to where the commitment's actually going to take place, and the reality is that you'll be 3,000 miles from home. Things get weird. So I do like where Oregon sits for Deuce Geralds today, but again, I've done this long enough to know that this could be a very long week for Dan Lanning, as he probably is sweating both of these out.
All right. I want to know how strong you would consider Oregon's current NIL machine. And I ask this because there's kind of two sides to this coin, right? If you read the comment section, Oregon's backed by Nike, they get everybody they want. Well, but also if you read the Oregon message board and if you watch our show, I mean, there was significant period of this summer where Oregon early in the summer was in what we would call maybe a slump in recruiting. I mean, there was a lot of targets that they did not land. So if you were to believe the comment section that Oregon just pays for everybody and they land everybody, then you'd have to scratch your head and say, well, why didn't they land all those big targets that they kind of missed on over the summer? So where do you think Oregon's current NIL is at?
Yeah, I mean, you basically have both sides of the arguments there presented, and it is. It's like, okay, well, Oregon landed them. They clearly bought them. But then, when Oregon misses, they're broke. And it's like, which one is it, right?
Right.
And I think the way you have to look at Oregon is this, and I think it's similar with Ohio State and Georgia and Bama in years in the past. Oregon has a very, very talented young nucleus in Eugene right now on the roster. A lot of young guys that are, true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, whatever the case might be. They are really in a position now where they don't need 30 commitments at all. They don't need to go land a class of 30. They need to land probably, I'm going to guess at the end of the day, 17 to 20, maybe 21 of the right guys that basically will be able to come in. So Oregon has had more, they've been in the game for more big targets than I've ever tracked in a recruiting cycle before. Yeah, they were in it for Jared Curtis and Jackson Cantwell and these other elite players. Didn't get them all right, just they're not going to. But to be in that top two or top three or final two, final three shows that Oregon's able to play ball with the best of them. They've got, the highest average rating per commit class right now in the country. So, again, I think you just look at Oregon, it's like, all right, this class is going to be based on quality, not quantity. And the one thing we have to look at, and my point to NIL, they can be aggressive with certain targets. But the other part is this. They also need to allocate a pretty good amount of money into the team they already have and keeping those guys in Eugene. Oregon's one of the very best to do that. They very rarely lose a guy to the transfer portal that they truly want. Yeah. And if anybody's even thinking about it, they can usually get that handled internally. So you kind of have to look at it two ways and at least appreciate, okay, look, they've got a good young team there. They just need to kind of pick and choose. But yeah, they're literally not just signing out blank checks. Otherwise, like I said, Jackson Cantwell, Jared Curtis, and some of these others would be on the Oregon commit list.
Right. Richard Wesley, Tyler Atkinson. I mean, they were involved in almost everybody. And like you said, it's kind of like recruiting or retention. Which one is Oregon really going to open up the faucet for? And who knows? Maybe into the fall, there are some important targets that maybe could be early playmakers for Oregon, and they could say, oh, well, let's break the bank for him. So that leads me to my next question. Who are maybe a few names committed elsewhere right now that Oregon fans should maybe keep an eye on because the Ducks could make another run at this fall?
Yeah, I know, fans get leery of, we're going to rely on flips or whatever the case might be, but that's the new recruiting, right? With all these young men coming off the board in June, July, you and I and the others get to cover a second recruiting season in the fall, which is flip season. Oregon will go big game hunting once again. So, they're not in a position where they're looking for fallbacks. So a couple names that immediately come to mind, Zion Ely, the edge, committed to Maryland. We know that. What will happen with Maryland this season, and will that impact, Ely's commitment? I think you look at Anthony Jones that we talked about earlier, another edge prospect, what Oregon does there based on what Jones does, might impact Ely. Oregon was in the game pretty heavily for Chris Henry Jr., Caden Dixon-Wyatt, both receivers committed to Ohio State. I think the Ducks did a great job getting Messiah Hampton and Jalen Lott, but would love to add a third receiver in this class. I have zero doubt that communication at the very least has continued with both. Oregon did lose, a star offensive tackle in Cody Green to Washington. The Huskies were able to flip him. That was a big one on the recruiting trail. Again, I know Oregon would love to get another elite offensive tackle in this cycle. I think Cody Green's a one to watch. Last one I'll give away here is Joey O'Brien, safety. The kid's just phenomenal, had a huge spring and summer, obviously made a commitment, and it wasn't to Oregon. I think Oregon felt very good about where they stood with O'Brien at various times, and I think he might be a tad bit impressionable. There's nothing wrong with that, but if they are able to get him back on campus later this year, I think that's a guy they would very much like to add to the commit list. So those are just a few of the flips, but we know – Dan Lanning's one of the very best when it comes to those like late minute flips. He's really good at that stuff.
All right, Oregon fans and Oregon haters, let's talk about this in the comment section. Where do you think Oregon stands in the world of NIL? Because like we said, there's kind of two sides to this coin. Where would you rank them amongst the big hitters like USC, Georgia, Texas, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama? Where would you put Oregon in that group? Let's talk about it. Comment section below.